What a weekend! What a game! What a team! What a season! How are you today?
I don't know where to
I
begin.
don't
I
know where to
guess the
begin. I
begin,
guess
begin just us
begin
last.
just us last.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm feeling all
I'm
right.
feeling all right. What about you?
Yeah, well, feeling all right would be a stretch if I were to speak from my own perspective. But I mean, it was just the most predictable yet unpredictable thing in the world at the same time, and it was, oh man, I mean that we're gonna get into a lot of this later, but that had to be one of the worst, just one of the most utterly embarrassing performances from any perspective you can possibly imagine in the last, I don't know. I've been here since 2018, and those have been like the worst 4 seasons of the 21st century. And like this is that one's up there. That game was up there.
Yeah. A lot of people
A
I
lot of
talked
people
to
I
said
talked
the
to.
same thing. I wasn't
I
around for
wasn't
the
around for
season. I came around for
came
the
around for the
season.
season.
So I kind of was a little
A
bit
little
drunk,
bit,
I guess, but that was
that was a
a low point.
that was a low point.
It was bad. No, I was thinking at some point in the fourth quarter, I was like, this has to be rock bottom. And then I was like, okay, 2018 happened. That was pretty much a season of rock bottoms. But as I also said, I mentioned this in a tweet. I was like, they have 10 more games to go. They can easily hit rock bottom and then double and triple that. They have plenty of time. But anyway, let's get into the game. We have to do this, I guess. Let let's keep it right now to the X's and the O's, right? What actually happened? We're gonna get into. I promise we're gonna get into a lot of this stuff. Um, I think everybody can imagine what that stuff's gonna look like. But why don't we talk about what actually happened in that game? What went wrong? Of the many things that went wrong, which were the worst that went wrong? Anthony, what do you got?
Yeah, it seemed doomed from
It
the
seemed
start.
doomed from the start.
Parker Lewis
Parker Lewis rejection
was bizarre.
was bizarre. I mean,
But really, I mean, to
but
keep
really,
it
I mean, to
simple,
keep
it was just a penalty on the defensive end. I mean, it really hurt them at the defensive side of San Jose State. Obviously, okay, San Jose State might not compare to Stanford, but 7 points to any team is pretty impressive. But the penalties just destroyed them, destroyed their confidence. And that big run from Austin Jones, Stanford's running back, or no, Austin Jones, excuse me, with Daniel Pete, that 80-some yard touchdown, that kind of just ruined the momentum for the defensive team. And I think it might have been Drake Jackson who talked about it after the game. They asked, did that ruin the momentum? And they kind of just said, no, I mean, it's a part of the game. But yeah, I mean, it was the penalties. And I mean, there were so many drives where the drive ended, they got a stop, then there was a penalty, an offside penalty, passing interference, unsportsmanlike conduct that just killed everything. On the offensive end, just a three and out, three and out, three and out. Clay Elton talked about it a little bit. The poor field possession, or not possession, excuse me, position. That kind of ruined everything for them too. It was difficult to watch. The penalties, especially, like I said, never really allowed them to get any confidence. I mean, it was just poor all around. I mean, Clay Elton said it. They got executed and they got beat in every facet of the game. There was really no positive in my mind. And usually I'm the positive one out of the two, and I couldn't find the positive. Maybe the run game, but that doesn't even count. It was just all bad. And yeah, I'll leave it to you.
You a positive, and this is kind of stolen from what Clay Helton said in tonight's Sunday night press conference. The specialists had a pretty good day. Ben Griffiths had some good punts, and Alex Stadhouse had some nice field goals in a good game kicking the ball. So if you want to hang your hat on something, I guess kicker and punter, man, of all the everything this team has going against it right now, you can rest assured you can sleep easy tonight, Trojan fans, because you know that your kicker and punter are just playing some excellent football right now, and they are, sure. Like I'll give them credit; they had a good game, but man, yeah, it was pretty tough to watch. It was like there was a point right around the middle of the third quarter when USC got a field goal, and then they got a nice stop on I don't think it was in the red zone, but it was in their own territory against Stanford, and it was like, okay, the momentum's coming back. You were kind of thinking, look, this team, and I'll hold by this claim right now, even though they lost by what was it fun? They lost by 14 points, but they didn't lose by 14 points. They lost by basically 25 points. Anyway, you were like, okay, this team's more talented. They're probably a better team. Stanford just lost to Kansas State by 17 points. They scored 17 points the entire game. They're down by 8. They have the ball. It's at home. I don't know. You're kind of like, this is looking okay. Like they can, I don't know, even if they get a field goal here, they're within 5 points. And then the pick 6, and it was just over. Helton talked after the San Jose State game about how defensive touchdowns can be momentum shifters. And it was in the first game when Greg Johnson had the pick 6, early in the fourth quarter. And boy, he was right. he was, for everything you want to say about Clay Helton, and we'll get into that later, he's right that defensive touchdowns can shift the momentum of a game. And that's exactly what it did, because from that point on, it was all Stanford. And it was no USC, and it was lifeless, and it was pathetic, and they looked uninspired, and the stadium started to empty, and it was just embarrassing. And it was something that shouldn't be happening at this point in Clay Helton's tenure. I'm sorry, it just should not be happening. That's the Pac-12 opener, the first Pac-12 game since fans, were last in the stadium in 2019. It's a night game. It's like the student section, they had to freaking hold overflow seating in the student section because it filled up to capacity. It wasn't a sellout, but there were a decent number of fans there. And then they go out. Wow, it was just they looked so underprepared. They looked so uninspired. They looked so lifeless. There was no energy whatsoever. And even coming out of the gate at halftime, look, going into halftime, like I said, I thought they were going to win that game. I said, look, hot take, they're playing atrocious. Their second leading receiver had 16 yards at that point behind London, who had 48. But I was like, okay, they're probably going to win this game. They're probably a better team. They're starting with the ball. And then they come out of the locker room at halftime, and they're just like, some of them are slumping on the bench. And you can just see, you're like, dude, this does not look like a team that thinks it can get the job done. It doesn't look like a coaching staff that's really inspiring much confidence in this group. And wow. There was like a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minutes in the third quarter where you're like, maybe they are going to come back. And then from then on, it was just nothing. I want to talk about the red zone, because this was a problem in the San Jose State game. And it makes no sense whatsoever. There was third quarter again, right? They opened the second half with, I'm pretty sure it was the first drive of the second half. They looked great. They were using Joseph Manjack. They were using Michael Trigg. They were using Taj Washington. It was like the most efficient and best that their offense looked the entire game. And Drake London didn't catch a single pass in that entire drive until they got to the red zone. Well, the entire drive overall. But it was basically exactly what everybody's been saying, right? Drake London is uber talented. Biletnikoff, maybe, like, he's just a stud. But they're going to need to get somebody else involved. The running game was good on that drive. Everything looked like it was clicking. Keaton Slovis looked good. We'll talk about him later too. And then they get to the red zone, and it was literally 3 yards inside the red zone. They were on the 17-yard line. The first down, 1st and 10 from the 17, was that like botched handoff or botched snap that Keaton had to pick it up. And then as he was running away from the oncoming pressure, he had to throw it out of bounds. So there's a loss, or not a loss, but a loss of down, 2nd and 10. Then the next play, it was like, if I remember correctly, he threw it like basically the entire width of the field. The problem is it went nowhere. So it was a gain of 0 yards. So now it's 3rd and 10. And then the last play was the play where Gary Bryant tried to dive in the back of the end zone. And thankfully he came up okay on that play. It looked like he kind of hit the goalpost pretty hard. But like, how is that possible? How can you have a team that looks so good for a flash like that, and then all of a sudden gets in the red zone and is just terrible and cannot do? It just makes no sense to me. Do you have any explanation? I realize I'm like asking you to solve the problem that's been at the center of every USC struggle this season, but like, what? My question is, Anthony, what?
Well, I would say that say the red zone problem. The red zone problem is a scary one because how do you get? It seems like they're more comfortable on like the 50 on their own 20 than when they're right in the goal line. And I honestly do think it's a mental thing. It's been talked about, and reporters ask what's going on in the red zone. We get the casual answer, type stuff, but it just doesn't seem like that. They get very nervy and just on edge, and they're kind of just out of their comfort zone. And there were 2 open touchdowns that were dropped in the red zone. Drake London and I think Joseph Manjack might have been. I mean, how does that happen? It just doesn't make any sense. I agree with everything you said about the red zone, but I do think it's a mental thing. I think they get more tense because they know that they have those red zone problems. And the first touchdown they had, it's not like they got it on the first play. It took them about 5 tries. They were on the 5-yard line. I mean, 5 drives, 5 times to go 5 yards. It just doesn't add up. And the red zone, the fact that we took this long for us to talk about the red zone problems can tell you how bad this game was from all aspects. So we'll move on from that.
It ended up working later in the game, but in garbage time, it didn't really like whatever. And why don't we call a QB keeper to Keaton Slovis on, what was it, like 3rd and 4? Like, oh, that's some galaxy brain decision making right there. That's probably going to fix everything. And lo and behold, it fixed absolutely nothing. We have a comment from Adam Jasper in the chat saying, it's rough when you're complimenting the backup kicker. He's absolutely right. Good observation, Adam. But hey, backup kicker had a great game. And then we got Wills Rice, host of Devil Dash, saying, obviously Clay Helton is first to blame, but unbiased opinion, it felt like execution was poor and they just got outplayed. Look, Wills, you are very, very correct. I mean, okay, Clay Helton was first to blame because he should be first to blame. It was a horrible performance. They looked underprepared. They looked undercoached. They looked uninspired, all of those kinds of things that you can often trace back to the coaching staff. But there was some pretty bad execution. I mean, the play that really swung that game was the pick 6, which it wasn't a good throw by Keaton Slovis. Drake London still probably should have maybe caught it. I don't know. I need to watch that play again. But it was just neither of them were particularly incredible in that particular play, and that was what ended up doing it. You would like to think that the coaching staff or the coach can rally his guys enough so that when something like that happens and it starts to slip away and get a little bit out of hand, they can sort of rein it back in and come back and, I don't know, turn the tide or right the ship or whatever you want to call. But yeah, execution was not great. The penalties too was something else that just wasn't very awesome. There were how many? Like 1.5 million pass interference calls that extended some of Stanford drives, and like they forced them to a field goal at some point in the second quarter, and then maybe it was the third. I don't know, one of those. I think second. And then like 2 different PI calls ended up giving them a pretty good shot on 4th down, and they ended up turning that into a touchdown. So yeah, execution was pretty terrible. It wasn't good. Wills is also saying, do you think Stanford laid an egg in week 1, or was this just that bad of a loss? To be honest, I didn't watch week 1. I don't know if Stanford Kansas State is a game that I like necessarily circled on the calendar. And they probably underperformed in week 1. Obviously, the quarterback change definitely helped things in week 2. But I mean, losing 24-7 to Kansas State is losing 24-7 to Kansas State. They can be not that bad of a team, but still not that great of a team. And it doesn't excuse anything what happened. I mean, USC scored a garbage time touchdown late in the 4th quarter that without that touchdown, Stanford would have beaten USC by more than USC was favored to win by, and they would have doubled USC's score. So, I mean, that pretty much tells you all you need to know. The game was 42-28. It was over by the time it was 42-14. Even before that, actually, it was 35-13 or 14 or 13, or I don't care, to be completely honest. But yeah, it was. Look, I don't think Stanford is as bad as they were in week 1, but like they're no world beaters, and I think it's pretty embarrassing what USC did on Saturday night. Do you have anything else, Anthony, or should we get on with it?
It's tough. This point is very accurate. The blame obviously goes. It's the classic, Hamilton, gamble, all that stuff. At the end of the day, he's not doing the execution. That can be a part blame on him, but the players have got to execute at the end of the day, and that's what they talk about in the post-game press conference. Whatever that word, that magical execution word means, and supposedly he's going to solve all the problems. Oh, we have to execute. Well, they have to execute, but at the end of the day, it's the players. They're playing the game. Obviously, Clay, there's blame that should be toward him, and we'll talk about it later. But yeah, Williams is right. Plays an execute. Stanford simply outplayed them. They just outplayed them. There's no other way USC to win. Just had a horrible game, and Stanford demolished them. That's really slow. That's all I'll say.
They did outplay them, and you kind of touched on a lot of what we're going to talk about next, which is probably going to be a long conversation. So here we go. Anthony, two-part question. One, is this the end of the Clay Helton era? And two, I think I know the answer, but should this be the end of the Clay Helton era? What more justification is there? I'll give my answer. It's not a pretty one. It's not a positive one, but what do they do? What do they do? What will they do? What should they do? Why should they do what they should obviously do? Go for it.
I'll try to tackle it.
It is the end.
What else is there left to say? Had so many opportunities, so many chances. You laid it out really nicely in your column about the excuses that he's had in previous seasons, and now this season there really is no excuse. Sure, maybe the wide receiving group is not as great. Sure, maybe the air raid is not working as great as we expected. I don't know, but look, this is the end. It has to be. It's getting embarrassing because not only are our fans been lobbying for this for years, but online. Johnson tweeted it out, said he's not going to fight on for Clay Helton, and I was an early supporter of Clay Helton. So it should be the end. At the end of the day, look, a major coaching change is probably the least they can do because it's been brewing for a couple seasons, and I think that it kind of hurts your recruits too. There were, a lot of recruits that are taking some official visits. Imagine taking an official visit yesterday at the Coliseum and hearing, the chants from the student section about the head coach. There's no way I would ever want to come back to that school and go for a visit. So it's time for a brand change. You got to just get rid of all this bad energy, the bad vibes, the bullying. You talked about the fans. They came out, packed the student section. It overflowed against Stanford. Who knows if they're going to show up, with all the respect to Oregon State. Who knows if they're even going to show up for that game? It's just Clay Helton right now is probably the most disliked figure on campus. It's unfortunately that because he's a nice man, but at the end of the day, the nice man attitude. Sometimes if it's not getting wins, you just can't stick around. Expectations are too high. He's talked about the championships. Mike Bohn has talked about it. We have high expectations. If you have high expectations, you got to let go of him at some point because he's obviously not meeting the expectations. Losing to an unranked Stanford team, you're ranked. It has to be the end. It has to be the end. And if it's not the end, then I really don't know what's going on anymore with USC football. But it should be the end. It is the end. I know you have a lot of things to say, so I will cut that to that. It has to be the end. And I honestly don't know any reason why it should continue to be this way.
I think I just felt a mini earthquake. It's kind of symbolic, if you ask me. All right, here we go. So, first 15 minutes, the first quarter last night, USC had accomplished all of these things. Kicker ejected for targeting. Wasted a timeout on 3rd and 21 when they were on defense. 87-yard touchdown. Guy was practically untouched. 2 3-and-outs. Delay of game penalty. They were losing 7-0. They were in the red zone, actually, so they were kind of threatening. So the 7-0 ended up being 7-3 or 7-7 or something like that. Whatever. Helton talked after the game, and he talked again today about how this is week 2, right? This is week 2. We still have a long way to go. And by the way, you talked about my column. I appreciate the shout out. I wasn't going to do it. You did it. Everybody read my column. Read Anthony's work over at the Daily Trojan along with Adam Jasper too. Anyway, this is week 2. It's true. It's week 2 of the 2021 season. It's also Clay Helton's sixth full season as USC's head coach. Let me walk you through the first 5 of those 6 full seasons where Clay Helton has been USC's head coach. The first 2 seasons, he had some guy named Sam Darnold. They were really good. They won a Rose Bowl. They went to a Cotton Bowl where they lost to Ohio State. They won a Pac-12 championship. Not 1, but 2, still decent. 2018, right? Darnold leaves. JT Daniels, the 5-star quarterback recruit. A terrible offense led by T. Martin sinks him. They go 5-7. Martin's fired, but Helton has an excuse. He goes, look, he didn't say this, but this was how it was presented. T. Martin was terrible, and T. Martin, don't get me wrong, was terrible. That team was bad. But Clay Helton had a perfectly valid excuse there. 2019, they come in, they take a step forward. Everybody loves a good step forward. This program's trending in the right direction, blah, 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 blah. They go 8-4. They play Iowa in the Holiday Bowl against a good Iowa team, right? They get absolutely smoked. It shows the difference between the good team that USC is, because I think that they are a good team, and they were a good team that season too, and the better teams in college football, the teams that are a tier or 2 or 3 above them, right? But there was an excuse that season. Mike Bohn had just been hired as the AD. You don't come in and just fire the new guy when you've only been there for a couple months, whatever. So he sticks around for 1 more year. Clancy Pendergast gone. 2020 COVID year, anomaly. Anything can happen. It's totally random. They lost to Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game, but you can take that with a grain of salt because, you know, USC must have been the only school dealing with the pandemic in 2020. By the way, that 5-0 regular season could have been 2-3. This year, there's none of that. COVID is still going on, but the season is full. The fans are back in the stands. His coaching staff has been set. The talent's there. What more do you have? The buyout, we don't know what the buyout is, but it's assumed to be less. 2 more years left on the contract. Like, what more justification is there for keeping him around? Why not give the reins over to Dante Williams or something like that? See what he can do with the team. Look, they have plenty to play for this season. Helton said that all our dreams are still out there for this season. They're not. They're not going to the college football playoff unless they weren't even going for that, which is a problem in and of itself. And I don't think people should appreciate the expectations being that low. Granted, this is also a team that sold Pac-12 South Division champions shirts last year, which is pretty embarrassing for a school that has 25 Rose Bowls and 11 national championships. Anyway, these are the same themes: penalties, lack of discipline, can't execute, which, yes, we talked about falls somewhat on the players too. They come out flat. They lose games that they simply should not lose. They look uninspired. Like, what has changed? What is new? It's the same stuff, Anthony, every single year. And I don't know how much longer of a leash you can provide. There's one common denominator the last few seasons. There's been multiple ADs. There have been multiple offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, a ton of different players. There have been multiple university presidents, and it's the same stuff. I don't get it. I don't get it. Do I think this is the end of the Clay Helton era? Right now, no, because he's not going to get fired this week. But do I think he's going to get fired this season? Should it be the end? It should have been the end yesterday. It should have been the end the day before. It should have been the end the season before. I just don't get it. The previous excuses were not strong as they were, but now there's literally no more excuse. There's no more justification. I don't know what more there is left to prove or not prove, I guess is a better way of putting things. I'm at a loss for words. I don't understand. This fan base is so apathetic at this point. Did you go on Twitter at any point during the second half of that game or after the game or this morning or probably tomorrow or the entire next week? People were like, look, there were 2 different approaches being taken. One was that I'm numb. I don't care anymore. I'm used to this. It's been happening ever since whatever 2018, whatever perspective you might have. And I don't care anymore. I'm used to it. I've been prepared for this. I know how to deal with this. It's unexpectedly expected. It's just we're all used to this, and we're familiar with it. We saw it coming. We also didn't see it coming. It's like apathy. It's just apathy. And then the second approach is, I'm glad they lost because now Helton will be fired sooner. But that's what they've been saying for the last 3 years, and he's still around. So I think above all, the one sentiment that encapsulates both of those feelings is just disappointment and confusion and just like what is going on as a program. We're wasting all this talent that we have. It's like it's so directionless and there's so little of a plan. And it's so infuriating that I I don't know. I don't know, Anthony, why this is still happening. It's not week 2. It is week 2, but it's not week 2. It's year 6. It's like the same stuff, literally the same exact stuff.
Yeah, let me add something really quickly. You talked about it's kind of like ruining it for now. It's also ruining it for the future because if recruits are coming and they're seeing this kind of instability, this type of coach drama, they're not knowing who's going to coach them. That's a problem. I mean, I'm not a D1 athlete, but if I was a D1 athlete and someone asked me to come to USC to be a recruit, first thing I would say was who's going to coach. I mean, that's just the main thing because you don't want to come. Let's say you come on a visit. You like Clay Helton, you feel you can bond with him, and then he's gone after the season, and by the time you come on campus, it's a different person. Let's say you don't like that person, and you transfer out. It's just a part of that system where you can save yourself until it or before it gets too bad, where you're kind of just in this position now where we don't know what to expect. And I saw a really good tweet where someone said USC fans see Groundhog Day not as a movie but as a lifestyle because I swear that lost last night. It seems like we've seen it before. Even for me, I've probably seen that before, and I haven't been around U.S. football for too long, and not as long as you. But I mean, just the fact that that's something that's talked about, and he's still around, it's a little alarming. I mean, it's kind of like, what are we doing here? Like, what's next? What's the direction? I mean, there is no direction other than you gotta just let it go. You gotta start fresh. You just have to move on because when you're losing fans, you're losing alumni. That's usually the worst thing that could happen. People that are passionate, have been fighting on for years and years, don't want to associate themselves with the school or with the football team because of a man and a coach. Then it's time to get rid of that man and start fresh. And I don't know what's taking so long. I really don't. Obviously, it's not going to happen right now. Like you said, it's still week 2, but look, if this season turns out and let's say they win every single game after this, I really don't know. Like I know you're not hoping that happens because Clay, but look, I honestly don't know what could happen, but I really don't think that this should be run back and be like, hey, let's give him another chance because he's had too many.
It's just so funny to me how I feel like a large part of the reason why we're still in this situation is that the school and the department have always wanted stability, right? Amid the president change, they were like, we need something to anchor the football team. And then the AD changed, they were like, blah, blah, blah. They are their own worst enemy because nobody cares about stability, Anthony. I promise you, not a single person cares about stability. You know what they care about? They care about winning football games, and they care about having a product that lives up at least close to USC's own standards. People don't care if, oh, I don't know who the face of this team is, or I don't know, I can't deal with all this change. I can't deal with a new president and a new head coach at the same time. Nobody cares about any of that. Maybe they do because it lines their wallets or whatever. But dude, it's they can't get out of their own way. And at some point it's obviously a tough decision to make. It's tough to do that to anybody. And I've talked about it. Clay Helton's, I think he's a good person. I think he's a really nice guy. And whatever he's doing in 3 years, I hope he's enjoying it and doing it well. It should not be coaching this football team. That's all I have on Clay. I'm sure we'll have more, but it's just I'm at a loss for words. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you said something really clear though. Like, I mean, it's easy for us to say Trojan Dash saying we should get fired, but at some point you've got to there has to be something. I mean, you can't just keep living on with this madness, It just doesn't add up. But yeah, I mean, that's really all I have to say. I'm sure we'll have more later on.
Players have to play well. Whoever the coach is, the players are going to have to do things that good players do. And Keaton Slovis, I still don't think he's the biggest problem on this team. I never thought he was last year when he had the, follow-up season to his incredible freshman year that just was kind of underwhelming. And I still don't think he's the biggest problem. Do I think his performance has been not a problem at all? I don't. I think that USC caught lightning in a bottle in 2019. I think Keaton Slovis is a talented quarterback. I think he has a future in the NFL. I think he's going to get drafted. He also is a 3-star recruit, and that doesn't mean much, but it does kind of explain why you're seeing sort of a regression to the mean that you didn't see in his freshman year. And maybe it's that defenses are starting to figure it out. Maybe it's that Graham Harrell doesn't know how to beat drop 8 coverage, but it couldn't be that. I just think he's a good quarterback. He's a talented quarterback. Freshman year was his peak. I don't know if he's going to return to that. And I think that USC's offense this year has not been great. Yeah, the receiving core is kind of shallow. They've had this remarkable thing the last couple of seasons where they'll lose 1 or 2 receivers to the NFL and the group will get better. It didn't happen this year. I think that's a kind of an understatement. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's just that he's fallen back down to earth a bit. I think he could be the starting quarterback on a Pac-12 championship team, on a Rose Bowl team, even a team that contends for the college football playoff. I'm not saying that they're going to do that this season, but I think he's good enough to be the starting quarterback on a top 10 team for sure. After his freshman year, there were people saying could he be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft in 2022? That was always unfair. It's unfair to put those expectations and that pressure on a guy that's, what was he, 18 years old at that point? I wasn't a huge fan of that, but the point is, I don't think that's going to happen. If it does, I'm happy for him. I think Keaton Slovis is a great kid too. I wish him nothing but the best also. But you were kind of talking about this last week. You said that Keaton Slovis, there's some worry there. And I didn't necessarily agree because I was week 1, he had good stats except for the second quarter. He was pretty good. I don't know. You might have been onto something.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned it last week. I was hoping it wasn't. That was just based off me being critical. I was paying extra attention and kind of being more critical. But yesterday, and maybe it's a little bit of the system. It's a little bit of that wide receiver depth not being as great as it previously was in the past 2 seasons. But yeah, it just hasn't looked great. It just hasn't looked like the Keaton Slovis that we know. 27 to 42 for 223 yards, 1 touchdown. It's really not that impressive if you look at the game and if you paid attention to what was going on. I mean, I only counted maybe 1 deep ball, and that was late in the game. And Keaton's deep ball is really what makes him a special player. And 5.6 average yards in the air raid is not going to help you out. And really, we kind of expected him to go off in this game and have a better performance, but it just wasn't that. And I think he had some good moments. The problem is, though, the 3-and-out offense was just becoming too much of a consistent basis. I mean, they just go out. The defense wasn't getting stopped, so it just made the 3-and-out worse. The defense was on longer drives, and then the offense would come out and do 3-and-outs. And some could be on Slovis, play calling. But if you look at the offense, really their best bet is to run the ball, which is crazy to think about. That's really their most effective weapon at this moment because Slovis isn't getting the job done. He's not really stepped up as much as we'd expect him to do. I mean, this is his 3rd year. He's going to most likely declare for the draft. He should be balling out, and he's just not. And there's many things that could be attributed to it. Maybe it's just the system, like I said, the system or the receivers. But at the end of the day, he's the quarterback, and he's got the talent to make those plays and to make those things really not matter anymore. And the way that they're covering, even with the drop coverage that they talked about yesterday, look, you've got to find a way to work around it. I mean, it's easy for me to say, but he's, you said 3-star recruit, but he's at USC, the starting quarterback at USC. He's got a lot of resources around him, and he can get it done. And he's an extremely talented player, like you said. But it's not looking good. And the outlook, now you go to Washington State. If he stinks it up there, and that's a huge problem. I mean, there's no way that he ever will get benched, but it's a poor performance if he comes out next week and just doesn't show up because USC needs him now. I mean, their season is really on the line. If they lose at Washington State, you might say just goodbye to any big bowl game hopes, no matter what happens. So I think he's got to step up. The outlook is not looking great. I mean, it's just not looking great. He hasn't been impressive. The deep ball has just been non-existent. It's been 2 games, but still, I mean, at least 1 or 2 plays in either of those, but nothing has been impressive, and it's just unfortunate.
He's really talented, like you said. It's just, and I think he could be used better. I think that if he was used better and the offense was more, I don't know, suited to his strengths, it would look a lot better. And again, I don't think he's going to be the problem. But it hasn't been the solution either. And the offense has been what it's been, which hasn't been great. And the passing game has not been effective. They had 223 passing yards last night on 42 passing attempts, 27 completions, no picks, which is good. One pick. Yeah. So I don't know. It wasn't great. And I think there are a lot of people that are going to need to be a little bit better if USC wants to compete for a Pac-12 championship or a New Year's Six bowl or college football. Just kidding. That's over. Yeah. But anyway, that's going to do it for this edition of Trojan Dash. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you to those who hopped in the chat. If you're watching this back, not live, tune in next week as well, 8:00 p.m. Hop in our chat, interact with these awesome hosts of yours, these funny, exciting, and smart. And anyway, hop in the chat. Come on at 8 p.m. next week to break down another exciting USC game. I'm sure it will be against Washington State. Anthony, predictions?
No, please. I retired.
Okay.
Last week.
No, yeah, me neither. I wasn't going to give one either. They probably win. They might lose. That's my analysis. Thanks, everybody, for hopping on. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, all of those fun things. And make sure to tune into all of our other shows on our other networks as well. And Trojan Dash next week at 8 p.m. Until then, it's been fun. We'll see you next time.